One of the most important active transporters in almost every single mammalian cell is known as the sodium-potassium pump. The sodium-potassium pump requires ATP to move two ions, sodium and potassium. Sounds pretty simple. There's a little bit more detail to understand as far as how many ions are moved and where those ions are moved. So why is this pump going to be so important? Well, one of the major reasons why I'm introducing this transporter now is because we get to this in the nervous system about midway through the semester. And neurons require a concentration gradient of each of these ions. So that's shown over here. So recall what a gradient is. A gradient is when you have more of some substance, some solute on one side compared to the other. The sodium gradient that neurons require is high sodium on the outside compared to lower sodium on the inside. So notice the arrow is going into the cell. That means that sodium wants to go into a cell because there's higher sodium on the outside and lower sodium on the inside. Sodium is largely an extracellular cation. Most of the sodium in our body is found outside of the cells, whereas potassium is a major intracellular ion. The concentration of potassium is opposite. We've got more potassium on the inside compared to the outside. So potassium is going to want to move out. So what establishes these gradients? That's the answer. It's the sodium-potassium pump. So the sodium-potassium pump pumps sodium out of the cell. Okay, so here's the sodium. 3 sodiums that were inside are getting moved to the outside, building that concentration gradient of sodium on the outside. Every time it moves 3 sodiums out, it grabs 2 potassiums and moves them in to the cell. So there's a ratio, 3 to 2. 3 sodiums out, 2 potassiums in. What this does is it builds a concentration of each of them. High sodium outside, high potassium inside. And notice right here it's just showing that for every time it does this, it requires an ATP molecule. So it's an active transporter of sodium and potassium. Other active transport mechanisms require vesicles. So remember, vesicles are membrane-enclosed containers. And here are the major types. Endocytosis. We have a form of endocytosis called phagocytosis. So this is that process by which immune cells engulf pathogens like bacteria. We have exocytosis, which is moving substances out of the cell within the vesicle. And then there is transcytosis. Transcytosis is moving of a substance through a cell as a result of endocytosis on one side, so bringing that substance in, and then exocytosing it on the opposite side of the cell. So transcytosis is a combination of endo and exocytosis. So what all these have in common are they require energy, and they're using vesicles to move the substance. This is a drawing of phagocytosis. Again, it's a form of endocytosis, but we are engulfing a microbe. So in green here, it looks like there's actually 2 of these guys, 2 microbes that were out here causing an infection. This phagocyte, which is a type of immune cell, brought that microbe into a vesicle called a phagosome. That phagosome fused with a lysosome. There's that lysosome with digestive enzymes. Once those digestive enzymes get to that bacterium, it breaks down that bacteria in order to kill it. So this is one way our immune cells help us destroy infectious microbes. Real quick, to finish up this set of lectures, we're going to talk a little bit about mitosis and meiosis. This diagram shows the cell cycle. The cell cycle is what a typical cell goes through. If you think of a skin cell or a cell of your lining of your digestive system, or a cell that is an immune cell, it has a lifespan. And that cell is going to start as a single cell, and then it might eventually divide into two cells. So there's different phases of the cell cycle. There's a G1 phase, there's an S phase, there's a G2 phase, and then there's the mitotic phase, where it actually goes through the division. So the take-home message here is the cell cycle is kind of the life of a cell, and then it divides into two. Some cells are non-dividing. They exit the cell cycle, meaning they're not going to divide into two cells. They're going to stay as a single cell. An example of one of those is a neuron. When we make all our neurons, they enter a G0 phase where they're not going to replicate. They're not going to become 2 neurons, 4 neurons as we go through our life. They're going to stay. They're still going to function. They're just not going to replicate. Here's a little more detail. This is more of a biology topic, so I'm not going to go through every single little phase of mitosis, but this is in your book, and it does show a single cell eventually dividing into 2 identical cells. So that's the key to mitosis. Mitosis produces 2 identical cells. If we compare that to meiosis, meiosis does not produce identical cells. Meiosis is how we produce gametes, sperm and egg. So when we compare mitosis and meiosis, we need to know what cells do this. So mitosis is the somatic cells. Those are cells of your body, cells other than sperm and egg. Mitosis undergoes 1 round of division to produce 2 identical cells, whereas meiosis produces gametes. Gamete is a general name for a sperm or an egg. Those gametes are produced via 2 rounds of division. So you start with a single cell, you divide into 2, and then those 2 divide into 4. So as a result of meiosis, you get 4 cells that are genetically different. All right? That's the key to meiosis. You're producing genetically different gametes. So when those gametes merge back together, sperm and egg, you have a genetically different individual. So hopefully that's a little bit of a review of mitosis and meiosis. You can go back and look at the other figures if you like. We're going to keep it fairly general since this is not a biology, full-blown bio course, but you should know the difference between mitosis and meiosis. One other point, the cells that are produced via mitosis are diploid. Remember, diploid means 2 sets of chromosomes. So 1 set of human chromosomes has 23. 2 sets, therefore, would have 46. So every cell of your body, other than gametes, are diploid. They have 2 sets of 23. Meiosis results in a haploid cell. Sperm and egg are haploid. They have 1 set of 23 chromosomes.